So I'm just going to hand over, I guess, to James. So this is Get Your Priorities Right. This is the third session of the day from Resonate, so thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to hand straight over to James PITT from your army, who's going to just dive right in, and I'm going to turn my camera and my mic off, and if there's any questions, just hit me up. All right, over to you.
Thanks, Susan. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm James, and we've got Lucy from Infectious PR, Ellie from Someone Great, and Yao from the Playmaker group. So yeah, we've got something here to talk about. Get your priorities right. So yeah, how do we get musicians heard? How do we get your acts heard? What avenues of promotion are currently moving the needle in the fractured landscape? And which areas of traditional or non-traditional media should you be focusing on to break your act? So it's those kind of things that we'll be talking about today. A reminder, if you're in the chat, please, we want to hear from you because we'd love to get a little bit of interaction. We'd love to maybe take a little, questions after each section that we're doing. So yeah, please get busy. I don't want to sound like a pirate radio host, but I want to shout you out. So come on, let's hear you in the chat room. So the first thing we're going to do is there you go. Come on, Susan, let's get them going. So I guess we're just going to firstly talk through some of the basic, areas of PR to get us started. So Lucy, would you mind talking about radio and the radio landscape at the moment?
Cool. So hi everyone. As James said, I work for Infectious PR. So we are a PR agency. We work across radio, press, streaming, etc. So I don't know how much everyone knows about radio, but I suppose to kind of break it down on a kind of basic level, you've got a few different areas. So you've got like commercial radio, specialist radio, dance music radio. With what we do at Infectious, we tend to focus on a lot of specialist radio. So we work with a lot of dance music artists and DJs, and essentially we'll work with albums, EPs, singles, and just try and build them over time and get them support from radio DJs. That's kind of a very brief overview. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into at that stage, James.
No, I mean radio. It's. I think people know what radio is. So yeah, no, thank you, thank you for that. Press, Ellie, would you give us a quick London print and online?
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Ellie, and I work in PR and also radio plugin as well. In terms of PR, music PR is split between print and online. Usually those are the two kind of main categories. So that covers everything from newspapers, magazines to websites and blogs. You would hire a music publicist when you have the release of new music, so that could be an album, an EP, or a single, or you could hire PR around a particular sort of event, so a tour or anything like that, really. I guess the only other way that PR is split is you can hire a national PR or you could hire regional. Regional tends to get hired if you are touring, which obviously isn't really happening at the moment. And national covers all of the big national publications. Yeah. I guess that's about it for now.
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. And then I guess I'll take the DJ promotion side of things. So getting your music out to those tastemakers that can support your music is a really important thing in certain areas of music. Obviously, the UK sort of black music scene, there's some really great DJs and people that can support you, networks there. And obviously, traditionally, as we've gone through the last 20, 30 years, in dance music, that's a very important thing to happen too. So yeah, we've been sending music to DJs for over 30 years now. Well, I have anyway. The thing that I think is most important of that is for those people. And dance music's all about networks, all about support networks. And if you can get your music heard and played at the right time to some of these tastemakers that run their own labels, that book events, it's a very, you've got a good group of people there that can support you throughout your career. So it's not just getting your music played in clubs. It's making sure that those tastemakers feel as if your artist is part of their scene, that feels as if they are the ones that have kind of supported them and discovered them first. So if you can get those people to really to shout about your artist, then you'll start to see a big difference in the career of the artist. So that's DJ. And then, if you could talk us through some content stuff, please, mate.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I've been on a lot of the sides of the coin. So I've done most promotions. I've actually worked with Your Army on a partnership project for Style OG a couple of years ago with Freebeat. So I've done that side. I've also had artists signed to labels, and I've kind of coordinated their campaigns and brought in PR and radio pluggers, and also obviously running a label as well, kind of, looking at it from that perspective as well. So yeah, I've been involved in quite a bit, but one of the things our company does a lot of is content creation and content marketing. So creating assets, I suppose, to help PR and radio and to help the artists generally kind of spread their or grow their audience.
Great. Thanks, mate. And I just wanted to quickly touch on streaming. Obviously, is something that some PR agencies can help you with. Some people promise it and can't. But yeah, so it's editorial, which is obviously the DSP-owned kind of editorials, your Spotify playlists and your Apple playlists and your Amazon Music and YouTube Music. They're all got some really good playlists that you can get your artists in. And then there's obviously third-party streaming as well. So if a DJ does their own playlist on Spotify, then you try and get your music in there as well, or a brand, or there's lots of third-party streaming stuff as well to get your music in. So yeah, those are the main areas of promotion that we wanted to talk about. There's been some questions in already, which is great. Ellie, Lucy, maybe we can come to you for this one. Matt Dean is asking, how would a PR take me seriously as an independent artist, as a self-funded independent artist? How much I'd be willing or have to pay?
Well, I think the assumption that we wouldn't take you seriously is misplaced. I think that we're going to come to it a bit later, which will probably be quite helpful for you, because we're going to have a section where we talk about how to approach a PR agency. But basically all I'd say is, in your kind of opening email, make sure you tell us why we should want to work with you. Is there any buzz around you? Have you managed to kind of foster a bit of buzz on your own without a PR agency? You could always have a crack at, on your first release, perhaps kind of contacting blogs and yourself, seeing if you can get people on side, because then when you do get a PR on side, they've got some kind of past stuff to work with. They've got some supporters to approach, and they can then kind of take that to the bigger targets that you maybe wouldn't be able to secure on your own. In terms of price, it really varies, because we can be hired for such a range of different things. I think probably have a think about what your budget is, go to someone, ask them for a quote, see what they say. If it's way out of your kind of budget, then go back and say, look, this is what I've got. Maybe we could do online only. Perhaps we could do just a single, all those sorts of types of things. But I think we're probably going to cover this in a lot more detail, which will be really helpful for you in just a sec.
Good. Good. You've managed to avoid how much money thing, so good. Well done. On the radio side, somebody's asking, at what stage should a band's career should you look at hiring a radio plugger? And should you build profile and release a certain amount of songs first?
I think there's really no one size fits all kind of answer there. I think much like Ellie said, there is a lot of stuff you can do off your own back independently to kind of build a bit of profile, get a bit of a buzz. So we're really lucky in the UK with BBC Introducing. It's a massive platform where you can literally upload your own music, and it's quite likely that if it is good quality, then it will get supported within the regional area. And I think what we see is that BBC Introducing is a brilliant way to feed into the national BBC stations. So I think it's a difficult question to answer. There's really no set time where you should approach an agency. I mean, we work with all different sizes of artists, from people on major labels right down to sort of development apps who it might be, their debut single or whatever. I think really think about what you can do to make your brand as clear and coherent as possible. And yeah, definitely try and approach some local stations and get a little bit of support off your own back.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Yeah, you're right. I mean, BBC Introducing such a, we are very lucky to have the BBC in the UK. We've got an office in America, and it's there's nothing like that over there. So, it's an amazing place, and sometimes actually the only place that you can break a certain type of music. So yeah, we'd definitely recommend everybody, uploading to the BBC Introducing. It's quite easy to find out who does your local show and to email them as well and give them a little plug. So yeah, it's something we definitely recommend, but also something that obviously a plugger can help you with. But that's something you can do on your own. Good. We've been asked by the good folks at Resonate to cover the subject of, how do we get our priorities right? What should we be doing? What are the key objectives that you should be looking at? What you're trying to achieve as an artist, and how can a promotions agency help you achieve those objectives? So I guess in answer to some of those questions, it's the kind of style of music you do. What kind of style of music have you got? Make sure that you're finding out where your audience is and where they discover new music, and make sure that you find an agency that can help you do that. As I touched on the promotions and the DJ promotions side of things, who are the tastemakers in your scene? Who are the people that if they're going to say, this is happening, you're going to be over the moon with, who are those people? Who are those support networks, within your scene that you want to integrate your artist into? Are there any labels you want to be able to release on it? Any events? What tastemaker DJs, as I've said, any radio targets, have a really good think about that before you approach anyone, because if you've done your homework, that will come across really well. Is there anything else the guys should be thinking about, the objectives that they should be trying to talk to an agency about?
The only thing I could think of really in terms of what you should prioritise is kind of getting all of your ducks in a line before you look to start your album campaign. So many people kind of jump the gun and announce an album and then realise that they don't have everything ready to go. So it's worth thinking about what the lead up times are in PR. So with an album campaign, if you were looking to hire someone to work on print press, and that's looking at getting you reviews in like Mojo, Uncut, all those kinds of places, bear in mind that they work 3 months in advance. So you need to make sure that you've got your album mastered, you've got streams ready, you've got CDs ready to go out 3 months in advance. And then also, I quite often get sent music videos like a week before the single's release date, and you're not going to be able to maximize what you're spending your money on if you're not already ready. If you've got kind of high quality assets way in advance, then we've got a lot more time to play with, and we can kind of spend more time pitching those to the better sites, really. And if you're kind of scrambling to get them together at last minute, it's not really going to be the best kind of use of your budget, I guess. Also kind of making sure that your aesthetic and your brand is as strong as possible before you get going is really great, because when we're presenting you, we want everything to look right, because that's what people see first. They see the press pictures, they see the music videos, and if it looks professional and it looks cool, it's going to make them want to listen to the music.
Yeah. And a lot of artists come to promotions agencies before they get management now, don't they? And before they get a label, because they know that labels haven't got as much money to invest anymore and aren't investing more. So they want acts that have already got things going. So I think it's definitely worth thinking about, your targets and what they'll be looking for, out of an artist, who are those people at those labels, what are they going to be looking for in order to your dream labels, in order to sign you, and weirdly at the moment, the only visual representation on a streaming platform, how popular you are, is Spotify, in the Spotify numbers. So, I've been talking to a lot of managers recently that are very well respected, and lots of people trying to get managed by them, and they're really not taking anything on unless the acts have got a footprint of Spotify and have got a certain amount of streams, monthly listeners a month, and all that kind of stuff. So, what kind of things can a promotions agency do to help you achieve, your objectives? And what are your objectives? Good. Any other question? Anything else you want to chat about there on objectives and how a promotions agency can help?
No, it seems like what everybody's saying is spot on in the sense of kind of getting your own stuff in order, really understanding who you are as an artist, what the key platforms you're trying to get, who are the key tastemakers and influencers in that space. And I agree. I think Lucy might have said it before. Is like, if you can do some of the stuff early doors yourself, it will help. It not just help with, looking more appealing to organisations to work with you, but also for your own understanding. I think a lot of artists do themselves the injustice by sometimes just wanting to farm out a lot of responsibilities, and then when things don't necessarily go well, they don't really know enough about the space or who, James, one of your team may bring in a great option of a premiere, and if the artist doesn't know or the manager doesn't know whether that's good, bad, or whatever, doesn't have an opinion, it's not your responsibility to make those decisions. You can only ask, and I think it's about artists kind of empowering themselves and managers empowering the artists by making sure you've done your due diligence even before you go and speak to third parties, about helping you with programs. Just kind of know where you're going and why as well.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Okay, thank you for that. I think, one of the questions earlier touched on budget. So I guess, in this current climate, what are the things that really move the needle? What are the things that an agency can do for you that can really make a difference to your act? Are there some areas now that you're finding that move the needle, or are there some areas that you're thinking, people should avoid and not spend money on? Maybe there's a kind of a timeline to that, what are your thoughts on that?
I think from our perspective, we've seen quite a big shift in sort of traditional PR, as it were, over the last few years. So I think PR is moving much into much more of a broader space, so to include influencer campaigns and things like TikTok. It's just massively changed. There's so much more opportunity to build music and artists than the traditional methods that there were before. I think from my perspective in what I do, radio is still really, really vital. It can have a huge influence on an artist's journey. If you can really find a tastemaker or a handful of tastemakers to champion a record over time and really support you as an artist and really shout about your growth, and I think it can definitely contribute to breaking you. And I think also it is about understanding where you sit in the world of music. So, you've got your Dua Lipas and your Harry Styles and the Little Mixes who are pop artists who work with major labels. But I think it's, if you are a very niche artist who works within a much more of a specialist realm, it's just really understanding what success would look like for you, and kind of understanding that you might have like a really, really strong quality piece of music that's like in a very niche genre. It's not necessarily going to get added to playlists on all these commercial stations, but if you can get a tastemaker to really champion you, then that's a really good sign of success. I feel like I've gone a little bit off tangent there in terms of budget. So I think, understanding what areas you want to maximize. I think obviously I may be biased, but I do think radio is very vital. I think PR is brilliant for helping build a brand and getting visibility. And also like the visual aspect in the press, I think, is really vital.
No, I agree. And also I think, using, obviously there's different genres of music. So for example, again, if you're a UK black music act, I think, there's a lot of great, I would use my budget on getting out to those tastemaker DJs and community radio. I think that is an amazing support network that you can do early on in your career, that can really affect your career. I think, as a dance act, again, DJ promotion is a fantastic way to start. Obviously, a lot of agencies touch on radio with their DJ promotion, so you can get it out to all those tastemakers through one agency. So yeah, and you know, and as you progress with that, I think like an international radio service would be a really interesting thing to do if you're a small label or you're an emerging artist. I think because that can really give you a real idea if your music's connecting on a wider level, you know. And if you see, oh well, hang on a second, there's some really good people in Berlin playing their music. Great, okay, what can you do in that territory? It's really good ammunition for if you've got an agent. Okay, get me some gigs in Berlin, you know. So I think an international radio service is really is really good for especially for electronic acts or even pop acts. But if you're a pop act, I think the best use of your budget would actually be content, because there's actually not a lot of traditional media outlets that support pop acts at the beginning. So I think the way to reach an audience as a pop act is to get really good content, make sure you know who the artist is and what you're trying to say. And create some really good content, put a little bit of spend behind it on socials, and, you know, obviously do some videos, do some performance videos, get it out there to people, and start telling people, you know, who you are in the absence of gigs at the moment. If once the gigs come back, then great, you know, start trying to get some support gigs. But yeah, it's for a pop act, then I think content is really key at the moment. And a really good use of budget, especially at the beginning. You know, if people discover you and they go back and see that you've done some really interesting content and you know who you are as an artist, then that's gonna really interest people and interest radio, interest, you know, managers or labels, whoever you're trying to impress. So yeah, so that's kind of how I'd recommend budgets be used. And yeah, as radio pluggers, radio as well, of course. Good. Okay. Thanks for your thoughts on that. So yeah, we've kind of touched on it. You know, the way that the media landscape's changed, and it's a little bit more fractured now. So yeah, which areas of promotion are we finding the most effective at the moment for our acts? What are the kind of things that move the needle for your acts at the moment?
One campaign I worked on a couple of years ago was for an artist called Alakai Harley. We had a joint venture deal with Polydor, and we used traditional methods of promotion. So we had PR, in-house PR, we had in-house radio, and also one of my business partners was Shawnee B, who's the leading dancehall DJ in the country. So we had a lot of those things, and she was getting played by the Tastemakers on radio, a couple of good bits of press, but it wasn't necessarily equating to numbers on an aggregator like Spotify. So we weren't necessarily seeing, or YouTube when we put the video out. So we actually spent the last bit of our budget, which wasn't amazing, on say an online influencer from the States who basically used her song in a parody video. And that added, like, I'd say probably at the time we were maybe at 100,000 streams, give or take, and probably 3 months later it was over 1 million, and it literally changed after that period. But that's editorially important for her and positioning wise, which was the radio, which was the press, you know, who she's getting covered by, you know, all those things. But it was the big bit, like, how are we going to actually add numbers? How are we going to get people to engage with it? And that ended up being the start of a massive, I wouldn't say fork in the road, but things, and we were able to build upon that. So again, I think it's what everybody said before. Going back to your art and working out as an artist, or for your artist, what is the thing or where the areas of potential win, and resourcing that adequately. But again, I think you need all that when you prioritize those extra elements, and when you press play, I suppose, in a sense of press go on some of these things, is because what you don't want, I think, is you don't want, you know, a top line plugger going in every time and go, this is the big record, this is the big record, this is the big record, because there's burnout through platforms. The platforms get a bit, you know, no one like Spotify playlist curators can hide themselves and change the emails and stuff, because that is a lot. There's a lot of burnout. Whereas if you build and build steadily, and then when you have got that big record or that big project, that's when you bring in the big gun to take it over the edge. I think. Yeah, that's good. That is probably the best way to, you know, use whatever resource you've got, especially independent people who haven't got a lot of money. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, one of the young acts that we're working with at the moment, they were nowhere. They'd released about 10 records. No one was taking any interest whatsoever. But they made sure that they got their distributor to do a really good edit for TikTok. And, you know, yeah, that's where it started, you know, and now, you know, they've employed a radio plugger. So I think they were having, it got to about, I think it was 50,000 plays a day on Spotify just from it being a TikTok record. And then they obviously added radio a month down the line, a few national radio plays, and then that's another 50,000 a day. So so you can see that if you're adding the right things at the right time, how it can start to spike, and that's how campaigns can start. But of course, it's difficult to find that starting point for your artist. You know, it's always, well, where is that?
Yeah, I think from like a PR perspective, I guess kind of even as little as like 5 years ago, it was normally kind of the assumption that press would be the first area to start picking up steam. But now press is much more in that journalists look at your streaming numbers, they look at your social presence, and they need to see that kind of a buzz online. Like in the old days, you could invite someone down to a showcase and they'd get to see it in real life, but now it's so easily accessible. They need to be able to see those numbers kind of ticking over before they become interested. I also think that like success in different areas really feeds into the success of whether your PR campaign is going to go well. I used to work in-house for a small independent label, and we signed in Canada who had put out an EP, and they'd managed to, off their own back, get like a fader article on post-punk in Canada. So that was kind of the one small thing that they'd got. And we didn't really know how. We were kind of shopping around to try and hire PR for them, but we decided that after we'd brought them over, the buzz was huge. Their tour completely sold out. They'd put out like one EP, and the live thing just worked really kind of organically, and it was very word of mouth. And that meant that when I was doing PR for them, it was extremely easy, which doesn't happen very often. So I think as much as I really value PR and radio, I think depending on the type of music that you're making, you should also prioritize live and kind of digital marketing on about the same keel. I work with a lot of experimental artists, so I obviously wouldn't recommend they go money on advertising and things like that. But maybe they want to put a bit more money into a print campaign, because there are still magazines like The Wire and there's specialist columns and newspapers that's worthwhile for them. Whereas if I was working with kind of a pop act, I'd probably, and it was their first release perhaps, and they were an independent artist, I'd probably say maybe we go for an online only thing, because the likelihood of securing print for EPs and singles especially is so slim. But you can't really get covered in any big magazines. You'd be looking at kind of the very, very competitively newspapers. So I guess about where you're at.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. You touched on something that actually we've had a few questions on in the chat. Matt Dean and Nathan Palmer are asking, how do we find tastemakers for acts that are maybe cross-genre? Matt gives an example of one of his acts is a little bit like Alt J. For me, I'd say, you know, yeah, again, look at the kind of things that have made the difference to those kind of acts in the past. You know, do your own research. You know, for example, you know, one of the things, the only bits of TV you can get in the UK is Later with Jules Holland, and you know, an act like that is very much supported. And Alt J, you know, did a big performance in Later, for example. So you know, so yeah, so if there's a place within TV which is rare, but actually can support that kind of act. Is there any other areas that can support that kind of act? I know that, you know, a lot of people in that scene don't find that there's a lot of editorial within DSPs and that actually support that kind of music. So, and there's no real YouTube kind of channels that kind of support that kind of music easily. You know, that you had those big lots of Danish YouTube channels and, you know, and maybe singer-songwriter kind of channels, but nothing that kind of really tipped things over the edge.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like not necessarily Alt-J, because obviously they got quite a lot of support from Radio 1, but there is that kind of a little bit of a zone between Six Music and Radio 1, I like to say, when you've got something that's too poppy for Six Music but too alternative for Radio 1. And I'd say if you're working with an artist like that, why not think about who kind of sounds like you are. Google their name and their first album, see what the sites were that covered it, see who the DJs were that were playing it, and approach. Yeah, I think that's kind of the best way of finding tastemakers, is kind of looking at their early career. You can just go through their releases and have a little search on who's written about. It's really valuable to picture of the journalists and the sites that might be championing that kind of music.
Yeah, for sure. And we mentioned it earlier, I don't know if these guys are logged on by then, but BBC Introducing, another fantastic way that kind of music out.
Also, I'd like to add, because I totally agree, I think, again, that those research skills, which keep coming up, is like research into it. But I think if you're in a space making music or you're managing an artist, you should really be in that culture. So you should know who the key people are, or the key, you know, even as a consumer, I always say to young artists, is like, think like a consumer. So try to take yourself out of it and go, okay, well, who do I look to for tips? And it might be friends, it may be a blogger, it may be just someone on social media, whoever it is, that may be your key, as opposed to kind of worrying about massive, you know, I need to get Animac or whatever, you know what I mean? That may be a bit further down the line, but the ones who may move the needle, local BBC Introducing person, or, you know, might not even be the presenter, it might be the producer on that show, or it might be a local blogger, it might be or just someone online. I think it sounds mad, and I've learned this from working in core spaces like jazz and alt jazz and reggae and all that. It's like you've got to jump in with 2 feet and actually be part of that culture, because it will make a lot of this side a lot easier.
Yeah,
and then you bring in people who understand the wider music industry to take you over the edge when you want to go more populist.
Yeah, I don't see being kind of, I've seen like a comment about being a cross-genre artist. I'd see that as a bonus, in that you've now got 2 avenues. You can approach your electronic people, you can approach your pop people, your folk people. That's a great thing. You've got a wide remit of people that might be into your music. And also, don't just focus on the big main ones, because if you are finding that you're kind of falling between the gaps, especially at radio, there's platforms like NTS, Soho Radio, all those places, and there is no chance that you'll be from a genre that won't fit on one of the shows, because there's so and places will then help you boost you up to the bigger ones, the national ones that you want to get on.
And I suppose with that as well, sorry, to add to that, Ellie, is they become your foundation. Because sometimes with the bigger DJs, you're not going to get every record or, you know, consistency. And some DJs at the higher level, it's a bit more transient. So you might get, I don't know, again, you might get Annie playing your record 2 or 3 times, and it goes to playlist, and she might not then support as much because you've gone to more of a daytime thing. So again, you know, having that core, and James mentioned before, the community radio stations and the online radio stations like NTS, like you mentioned, Ellie, or Rinse FM, except they become so important to your career. And so nurture that, and also don't be quick to just jump out from them to other places. You know, build a solid foundation with them before you move on. Yeah,
they'll be your network forever, won't they? Yeah. So yeah, keep them happy. Good. We were talking about the effectiveness of certain areas of promotion. Is there any other areas of promotion that we need to be chatting about that's effective right now? No. Okay. All right. Well, that's all we've got. Okay, good to know. No, I just thought we'd go. Good. Okay, next one. So we were talking about, we touched on this earlier, Ellie mentioned it, but the best practice and approach for artists. How do you approach a PR agency? What's going to make sure that you get your music listened to and get taken seriously? I'm sure we'll have a lot to say on this subject, even if we don't know what things are making a difference to people's career. Good. So how do we get noticed when you're approaching a PR company?
So let's talk real basics, because it's something that is always left out. Is I'll get the most beautifully constructed email with like a great story, loads of press quotes, but then no link to actually listen to the music, which I find quite maddening, to be honest, because we're not gonna be sold on an album based on just reading about it. We want to hear it. So include any assets that you've got, include your SoundCloud streams, include any videos, even if it's just kind of a rough edit, just so we can get like a bit of an idea of what the project is all about. Including things like past press is quite nice, including any radio play you've had, any tour dates you've got coming up, any streaming that's been going particularly well. All of those kinds of things are quite enticing for someone to want to work on a project. And being really communicative as well, I think. Just being the kind of person who's going to be available to chat about the campaign, rather than being quite hands-off. I think that's also a big one for me, because I'd much rather work with someone who's kind of going to be reactive and going to be kind of involved in their own campaign.
Yeah, and we touched on it in the last section, knowing your objectives for the campaign, knowing where you're trying to get to, knowing who those people that you're trying to impress and achieve, get those plays from or that support from, that's it's amazing how many managers, when you ask them what are your objectives for this campaign, they don't know.
Yeah.
And you need to know what you're trying to achieve, because otherwise, we can't help you achieve what you're trying to achieve. Also what I find interesting, obviously there's lots of ways of getting your music distributed at the moment. So I find it interesting if the manager or the artist is telling me who distributes their releases at the moment, who's the team behind what you've got. If you've got a label, is there somebody managing the artist? Because a lot of labels approach us and say, but if they've got a good manager, or it doesn't have to be a well-known manager, but a manager that I know is going to have the energy to make a difference to that campaign, the more likely that artist is going to be successful. So the more likely I'll want to take it on. The team around a campaign is really, really important, and something that is really good to tell your PR people you're trying to get doing PR. Reference some of the work that the PR company is doing. Follow them on their socials. Understand what they do. Understand who at that company is actually going to be doing the stuff that you want them to do.
James, I think that's in any email when I think that's the big one. It's like, make sure it's specific. If you're contacting your army or Infectious or whatever, you contact them because it's for them. So like, even using the name of the person you're sending it to, I just think out of respect and out of courtesy for busy people, and I have a whole thing. I don't like to send emails that are like longer than 6 lines as well, because I just think, have links or attachments, but most of us are running around, especially if you're in the music promotion space. You're not running around as much as you were, but you're still busy, so you might look at it on your phone. So a long email with somebody writing the whole life story, including the whole bio, is probably not going to get read for a long time until you designate a time. Whereas if you want people to get the key piece of information that's going to make the eyes open wide, a link or two to music, and then
I love it.
And then maybe a link to say, can we have a chat, or can we have a coffee when we can have coffees again? But it's just the intro email, and then you can have that wider discussion about all the stuff about your team and your ambitions, and but I just think a kind of tailor-made email to the specific people you're sending to with the information that makes sense to them. I think you're more likely to get a response.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, including like a really clear call to action. It sounds really simple, but you'd be amazed at the amount of emails we get, which is just, hi, I am this artist, this is my next release. We need to know what you want us to do with that release, where you're from, a little bit about you. But I think, like Yao said, don't send like a dissertation of information. A wall of text is like a PR agency's worst nightmare. So include key information, but try and make it concise and sort of digestible.
Yeah, indeed, and a timeline as well is really, and what when you're releasing, when your assets are coming, And obviously for print, it's very important that we have them 3 months in advance, you know, those kind of assets, because they're very long leads in print. So yeah, a timeline as well. And I've just remembered another thing that's helping people, coming back to our last question about what things are helping people at the moment, is again, having a release plan is actually helping at streaming sites at the moment. So streaming sites are really liking products at the moment. So EPs and albums, they know what where you're trying to get to, and they know what you're doing along that timeline. So they know they've got a few chances of putting your tracks into editorial playlists that might react. So we're finding that even with dance acts and with new acts, that we're putting EPs together, releasing one track that gives you a chance at editorial, then releasing a second track around the EP release. Is really helping acts at the moment. And another thing that's really helping at that level is I've been advised by a few distributors that let's use Spotify, but you can use any DSP as an example, but let's use Spotify as an example. If you spend from your socials pointing to your Spotify page with a good bit of content, or with indeed even just pointing to a regularly updated Spotify playlist, they will take that into account when they're considering editorial additions. Because if you're pointing to their platform, they're more likely to be supporting you as well. So even if you've released maybe 4 or 5 tracks down the line, a distributor said to me, you should be spending 15% of the money you receive from Spotify on pointing to Spotify from your socials. So and we've seen that work with a few.
James, just a question for me on that. Do you have to play the politics game and then do the same for Apple and Amazon, or do you just say put all your money in one space?
Good question. It depends on the music, you know, and it depends on who maybe supported you in your first couple of releases. So if you've got so maybe Apple really supported you and Spotify ignored you. So yeah, okay, let's put, you know, so yeah, and it depends on the genre as well. You know, Apple are better at some others, you know. So, you know, if it's a kind of electronic listening record, then Spotify, you know. But if it's a hip hop record, maybe Apple, you know. So it does differ. But again, Spotify is the only visual, you know, one. So a lot of people do go for Spotify. I think we've covered all the kind of stuff, the best practice in order to, you know. When you're approaching PR companies, so and we will get to the question about international tastemakers, because we have got a worldwide section at the end. So thanks for that. So yeah, Rosie, Susan, there's a few people asking international questions, so we'll get to that in a little minute. COVID, obviously, at the moment, I don't know if you've noticed, there's a thing. Yeah, but it's brought obvious challenges, and obviously the live sector is being decimated. So, you know, has the focus shifted to other areas of the industry? What are you seeing your acts and your labels? What are they asking you for now in this climate?
So I guess obviously with the decimation of the live industry, one thing that has really affected kind of so Loud and Quiet, for example, most of their income, or if not all, came from taken out. Most of those adverts were from festivals, from tours, some were from album release. And kind of when that all disappeared, their income disappeared, and therefore they had to go on a hiatus. London in Stereo on a hiatus. Crack had to pause printing their magazine. Guardian's gone down to just 2 album reviews a week. There's been a huge kind of scaling back of magazines especially, but even some kind of online sites are now running on a skeleton staff. So I think my advice would be that you should maybe expect for things to be a bit slower at the moment. Things are starting to pick back up. Those magazines are starting to get back into print and circulation again. But why not spend time focusing on the smaller kind of tastemaker sites? Because blogs are having a bit of a moment, I feel, in that the people that run them have been furloughed and they've had so much more time to write about music. Their output's gone just kind of skyrocketed really, and I feel like it's actually reaching people, and if not real consumers, it's reaching other journalists that write for the bigger places. So because I work with a lot of independent artists and kind of independent labels, we've been focusing a lot of our time and a lot more on getting these things, getting the kind of smaller blogs that will hopefully then have us on the radar by the time that this other coverage kind of resumes. And I guess as well, we've already touched on it loads of times, but just having kind of high quality content to put out, maybe some kind of behind the scenes stuff on how tracks are made, live, if you're doing a live stream, ideally it would be high quality, good sound, those kinds of things are engaging for people. And I think we've gone off subject now, so.
No worries, thank you for that. Anyone else?
I think we've noticed obviously a huge kind of shift in the type of music that people are tending to put out. As I said before, we work with a lot of dance music acts. So I think whilst, like James was saying, DJ promo is still really, really valuable at this time. You know, a lot of DJs have labels, or it's just a really good tick box, I think, to kind of, and visibility to get your music recognized by those tastemaker DJs. But I think obviously we don't have live events, and traditionally with a dance music track, you would kind of build it in the clubs and kind of get that social proof, and then it would be reflected at radio, whereas now we obviously don't have that opportunity. So I think it's been really interesting to see the shift in the type of music that people are putting out, and also it's been really nice, I think, for a lot of artists to actually have time to spend in the studio. You know, they're not trying to scramble between tour dates to like get a studio session in. They're actually having real time to be productive and pour some energy into creating music. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a massive surge in radio listenership, particularly on the commercial stations and Radio 1. So we were actually really thriving kind of at the beginning. We were quite lucky, I think, in the wider sense of the music industry, because we saw that surge and we were able to say to people, actually, now is a really good time to spend some money on radio. Obviously, it's potentially a more competitive space because there is more music and more people are following that trend. But yeah, I think streaming as well, there was people were at home, they were listening to music more on streaming platforms. So yeah, again, I feel like I might have slightly gone off topic.
No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, we were, as radio pluggers, we were relegated to the second in line in planning meetings because of the streaming guy always went first. But we've ended up being first on the last few planning meetings. So I think people are definitely prioritizing radio again, at the moment, and TV again. Listenerships, viewers have gone up a lot recently. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do, even just for socials or MTV in the box. And they're looking for a lot of content because more people are spending time on their channels. So there's definitely things opening up, and of course, being able to do something unique online and create a bit of unique content. Obviously, there's more chance of that getting seen as more people are consuming that kind of stuff online at the moment. So yeah, a lot of opportunities. We want to get in a few questions at the end, so I'll just get to the global situation and the challenges that are arising. I just mentioned webcast there, kind of didn't I? So that's been a big thing that's been happening over the last few months. Which ones of those have you seen that you think have been the most effective?
So there's been a lot of, you mean as in live streams, James?
Yeah, live stream one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's, at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was doing live streams. Like, I remember going on Instagram and the whole of the top bar was just the pink live circles, and doing live Q&As and things like that. I think the ones that have been possibly the most effective have been the ones where they feel intimate. So I know Leanne Navas did a brilliant one. She launched the album. Obviously, she'd had a bit of a kind of hiatus from releasing music, came back with this brilliant album, but was launching it in the middle of a global pandemic. So she did a live stream gig, but it was a paid for ticketed event, and I think all of the funds actually went to charity, to Black Lives Matter charities. But I think it was really nice because it was kind of filmed professionally. Obviously the sound was all brilliant, it looked really nice, and it felt really intimate. Of course, she has major label backing, and you know, if you're an independent artist, you're not always going to have the resources to put into making like a really high quality piece of content like that. But yeah, I think, you know, really trying to come across intimate and be a bit unique and really connect and engage with your audience is a brilliant way, and social media is a brilliant platform for that.
Seen a lot of newer artists do, like, I wouldn't say the making of, but making a EP music in real time and then just releasing it. So it's not chapterized, so but it's done in a way that people can follow it over a number of days. I've seen that work really well. A new artist that I mentored is he was going to do the traditional rollout of an EP, and then because of lockdown, essentially he created with a friend of his actually kind of a immersive listen party room where people will be able to go into different spaces and consume it. And then he brought on PR to then, well, when we roll out in January, they're going to work together to get that out. So, you know, just thinking about kind of ways, again, you know, the bedroom performance stuff, it's you know, when everyone is doing it, it's just noise really. So just think about interesting ways that will make platforms and people, which is the most important thing, actually be interested in it, I think are the best ways. And I think every artist has a different way. Like what a DJ may do will be very different than what a hip-hop artist will do than what a pop artist will do.
Yeah, sure. Good. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we've had a few questions on, you know, now we're talking about sort of global solutions. We've had a few questions about international things. So yeah, let me find the question again. Susan asked it, didn't she?
I'm just jumping in here. I'm just reading. Sorry. Do you think it's best to always start? I've got to turn my camera on. It looked weird. Do you think it's best to always start on a local level if your music's similar to country sounds of Nashville, for example, or the supersonic pop sounds of Scandinavia? Should people or those artists be looking at PR companies in those territories as opposed to maybe based here in the UK?
I think, you know.
Sorry, James, you go.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think that's one. Talking about globalization, I think that's one positive aspect of globalization, is that you can reach out to people in different territories, you know, if you're in the UK, you know. So yes, it's definitely, you know, we found, you know, artists approach us and we said, you know what, this isn't going to work in the UK, but I do know that Triple J in Australia really sports this kind of music. I know that Sirius XM in America really sports this kind of music. You know, reach out to them. You know, I'll tell you how you can reach out to them and reach out to them. You know, so depending on the type of music, yeah, you can find audiences in different countries very easily, and people that can support you in those territories. Again, it's knowing the music you've got, and knowing where that kind of stuff can resonate.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that as well, I think I've seen it this way, as in I work with a lot of international artists who are me, and I always have more success with an artist who's going to be playing UK. So if you can actually get yourself physically over to that territory, it's going to make people a lot more likely to want to cover your music because it's a lot more tangible. So kind of trying to get yourself on showcases in that area, like there's loads of showcases all across kind of Scandinavia and America, like you kind of mentioned, and various other scenes. And if you can get involved with one of those, then the PR side of things in that territory is going to be a lot more worthwhile if you are looking to hire an international PR company.
With that, Ellie, I think I worked with a country artist who was being kind of co-managed by Decca at the time, and she went over to Nashville and actually met people and done sessions, and it helped her get support over there. And even back in the UK, because she was getting supported a little bit on Radio 2 and a couple of the regional stations, it helped add authenticity to that as well. Yeah. And then there was another artist from Liverpool who ended up winning awards over there. In Liverpool, he's pretty much not known, but he went over there and spent 6 months over there. Was, you know, won awards, working with some of the top writers and producers over there. So I think if you're gonna do something that would resonate somewhere else, I think you've got to go over there and spend the time. Like we said before, you've got to be 2 feet in that culture. You don't think you can just use the internet and send stuff and assume, especially like something like country or whatever, where it's cultural. It's not just a music form. Same with like reggae. If you want to blow up in Jamaica, you're gonna have to go over there, because I know those DJs and radio stations and people, they're not listening to an email sent from England just because. So
yeah, we've had another question from Rosie Ahern about international. Do you think the best way to get artist music into international markets is through streaming, or is there still a value in physical CD, vinyl?
Different markets are completely different. Like I used to tour manage bands, and it used to blow my mind that people were buying CDs, like Germany and France, mad for a CD, whereas you have a really hard time selling one over here. I don't really know about America in terms of physical, but there are different places with different preferences. It's worth researching that before you put your orders in to get your physical stuff printed. Like realistically, what are you going to sell? Where are you going to sell to? Are you going to invest in marketing in that territory if you are going to kind of press thousands of CDs? But yeah, I do think there is still value to it. There's collectors, there's record stores. They each have their own kind of community around them. That kind of grassroots level of getting noticed is still valuable. But yeah, do your research before you go pressing loads.
Yeah, I agree. I think America, definitely, radio stations that we speak to are still very keen to receive physical copies, which I find mad, because in the UK,
it's crazy.
Yeah, nobody wants physical copies. I mean, there are certain DJs who love getting like a vinyl. So Giles Peterson is one who's known for loving to receive like a vinyl record, but generally it's pretty digital from a plugging perspective. But I think absolutely, like getting some physical copies pressed is still a really valid thing to do. And it's also a nice little brand thing. Like if you have live shows and things like that, it's a nice thing to a piece of merch to sell. But I think streaming is a brilliant way to break into international markets and also see where your music connects organically. You might get some amazing pickup in a territory that you didn't even know your music was being heard in.
Yeah, that's definitely great. Thanks, everyone. There's a few more general questions that people are asking. One of them from Katie was, how would your advice be for someone wanting to get a job in PR? Well, if you look at the people on this panel, we're all gorgeous. That's the main, that's how you, but any other advice?
I mean, traditionally internships are the way in. So I think reach out to people. Don't wait for those opportunities to fall into your lap either. Just research PR companies. There's loads. There's a lot of them are in London, but a lot of them are all over the UK. Also, if you want to go overseas, research ones in different territories. Why not? But I think find who the best people are to speak to. Drop them an email. Don't just wait for like a job ad to come up. Because personally, we're always looking, always trying to keep our ears and eyes open for new people who we might want to bring on board. And yeah, there's lots of things you can do, like start a little blog if you want to get into PR, learn the ropes of, what it feels like to receive press releases and be on that side of things. I
think that, but also actually, doing a bit of it yourself.
Build up a bit of a portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, do stuff yourself, get to know a band, do some PR for the band, just do it off your own back, because that's when I see someone actually doing it and wanting to do it, that's when I take notice.
Yeah, and you can find sort of independent labels who maybe don't have the budget to have an in-house PR person or to hire PR, and just be like, look, I've been kind of researching this and I'm happy to help out with kind of in-house PR stuff. that can always kind of lead to bigger things as well, because they might kind of start to realise the value of having that PR person, and reaching out to bands and friends and stuff, and just you have to be really proactive, I think. But there are lots of opportunities.
Absolutely, and going to things like this. Obviously, right now there's not real life conferences, but it's amazing that things like this are happening. So you guys are already doing some good things.
It's like a perfect time to jump in, just because we are at time. We are breaking for a lot. If we can squeeze in one more question. I know there's been a lot going on in the chat box, so we'll just do. We'll wrap up. But those kind words as well. So it's good. So James, you just want to do one more, and then we'll find out.
Well, and when we've had a question from Billy Kilty, I don't know who he is. So I think we should maybe take the one from Martha. She said, I've always used the same PR for attracting print, radio, online. Is it worth using specialists in different areas?
Totally depends, I think. Some people...
can't hear you,
Ellie. Some people see the value in having a bigger team, having a specialist doing radio, having a specialist doing print and online. I tend to hire the same person to do that, just because there's not so many print targets as there used to be. Some people also see the value in having one person that's their go-to for that kind of thing. It means that this person's got a lot more of an insight of the whole campaign and how it's working. Like I do print and online and radio for a few of my clients, and I think those are the relationships because we're into and feedback to radio people how things are going at press and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But it's totally on a case-by-case basis, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think there are specialists in different areas of music for sure. So definitely do your research and make sure you're approaching the right people. And now to answer Billy's question, so he said, we work with a German PR company, and they said that in the current climate, people are charging for reviews. Has anybody experienced that?
No. Well, a few sites now charge for premieres, which is bonkers in my opinion, but sure. I've not heard of anyone charging for reviews and stuff, especially not to the point where it's kind of everyone doing it. There are a few sites, but no, that sounds a bit dodgy to me.
And talking exclusive, what are your thoughts on exclusive at the moment? How are any of them actually moving the needle? What's
No.
No,
I think it's a different world. Like, previously tastemakers would love to have an exclusive and kind of champion it for a few weeks before it was out, and then it would come out and everyone would be like, oh my god, that's that song I've heard on the radio for the last month. It's different now because radio is a kind of competitor to streaming platforms, so we kind of have to accommodate the streaming platforms to ensure that tracks will get supported in playlists, and typically streaming platforms don't love it if a track's heard on radio beforehand. That said, I think it's about understanding your objectives, your market, who you are. If you're the type of artist who actually, for you, you're really young, you're a development act, it would actually be more valuable for you to get like a Danny Howard exclusive play on a Friday night, go for it. Because actually in the bigger picture, I think that could be more valuable than holding out for streaming platforms where it's a very crowded space.
I was going to ask Lucy, what about the other way with, is it worth being on streaming platforms and maybe 2 or 3 weeks later go into radio? Do you think that hit? Whereas we know radio gets hit. Streaming sites will be annoyed if you do that with radio. But the other way around, have you found that radio might get annoyed that if it's already out, or don't they care? Do they just care when they get it?
It depends on the genre. I think a lot of tastemakers like to have music, like brand new music. So especially in dance music. But I think if you're talking about potentially more commercial music, then often we're seeing that you go to radio a little bit later and kind of build the story elsewhere. But it really kind of depends on the genre, I would say.
Yeah, agreed.
Sorry, my face is appearing on the screen, which can only mean bad things. We are at time. I know we could talk about this all day. It's been a really, really amazing conversation. I have put links to all your websites in the chat. I don't know how you guys feel about maybe dropping your email address. It's really up to you. We are trying to sort our direct chat box out, so we'll be doing that over the lunch hour, which we're taking just now, so 45 minutes. But yeah, huge thanks to James, Ellie, Lucy and Yao for joining us for this session. It's been really informative and some really great points raised as well, so thank you so much. To everybody else that's watching, we'll be back in 45 minutes with the next sessions, so go grab a bite to eat, top up on coffee, whatever you need to do, and we'll see you back soon. So thanks again, guys, so much. If you just want to click the leave button in the top right hand corner, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Nice to meet you properly.
Yeah, thank you.